Again, we've seen a lot of advent of the implications of using CAR T-cell therapy in diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, and it has been really interesting for us to see how real-world data has reflected the clinical trial population outcomes so similarly. But it still remains a bit of a gap to understand where patients may be underserved by approaches with standard CAR T-cell therapy. Part of this may be addressed as CAR T-cell has been moved to second line based on the randomized controlled trials now in high-risk patients with early treatment failure. But we chose to look at analysis that studied our patients that had received third-line CAR T-cell, or at least the patient population intended for third-line CAR T-cell therapy, with a very practical clinical question. So in patients that were primary refractory to anthracycline-based therapy, what happens to a group of people that traditionally would go on to receive platinum-based therapy, and if that did not work, then progressed to CAR T-cell therapy as a third-line approach? What we saw was actually a high rate of inability to proceed to CAR T-cells, so a lower population going on to the treatment from an intent to CAR standpoint, really highlighting the opportunity to improve outcomes in patients that, although destined for CAR T, were unable to get there. What we also saw were reassuring outcomes in large part in the patients that were able to get to CAR T, but perhaps a signal that the outcome may not be quite as good, which may not be that surprising when you think of the actual patient population. So looking at this in patients where we're still thinking about third-line CAR, it becomes an important question. But for a lot of the world where we now have second-line CAR access, I think the implication here will be interesting as we look at patients that may not respond to a second-line bridging approach. Are these patients, again, that are going to be less likely to make it to a third-line CAR, or will their outcomes be inferior? So again, time will tell as we see additional data coming over the next few years.